Welcome back to 60 Miles from Anywhere. Today I'm going to talk about some of the challenges I've been facing with working on my book, as well as some other parts of my life that have been stressing me out quite a bit, and what I've been doing to get through them. Life happens at a pace we can barely contend with sometimes, and when you live out in the middle of nowhere, working for yourself, you're still not immune to any of it. If you've been enjoying this episode, please check out my website, 60milesfromanywhere.com. There you're going to find some more stories on my blog, as well as insights about creative writing and just life in general. My fiction is available on Amazon.com, and you can find the link on my website. The book is called Song of the Cinder, and it's available in both trade paperback and ebook for Kindle. It's a steampunk-infused alternate history with vampires, werewolves, zombies, clockwork automatons, and it's all set in an alternate World War I type universe. So if you're into fantasy and something completely different than what you're probably used to, you can check out my book. Like I said, it's on trade paperback and ebook for Kindle. Makes a great gift for that lover of fantasy and horror and weird fiction in your life. Your donation to support this podcast and my website are always appreciated, and you can click on the Buy Me a Coffee link on my website. Be sure to leave a rating or comment on the platform you're subscribed to. Ratings and comments help improve my rankings on platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and many others. I'm also an affiliate with Origin USA. They're a company that makes boots, jeans, martial arts gear, and all sorts of other stuff. It's 100% American-made in Maine. Click the link on my website and use code Harris10 for 10% off your purchase. I have a pair of American Bison boots, and I've been wearing those for the last 2 years. I take them everywhere. I don't leave home without them. I've put them through things that chew up lesser boots, from climbing up the side of a mountain to walking several miles a day in European cities. They work great on the trail, and if you polish them up, you can even wear them to a nice restaurant for dinner. I really need to work on my book. Life is a strange balancing act where I'm juggling the chainsaws of paying bills, writing content for pay, writing and recording podcasts, and somehow figuring out some time in there to have a social life. I've also got more court coming up, and every day I have to fill out forms for another stupid hearing is a work day I get to miss. Today has been challenging because I don't have any assignments that are due, so I've had a lot of the day just work on the book. I have a new computer for writing and my podcasting, just because my older one wasn't doing that great. And for work sometimes I might need to be a little bit more portable. It has a beefier processor and more memory power, which means it doesn't lag like a son of a bitch when I'm working with photos. I'll be honest, there are some shenanigans afoot, and I might not have a home soon. It's hard to use your computer for work when you've got an aging desktop computer. Even though it's an all-in-one kind of system, it doesn't lend itself to portability the way a laptop does, especially if you suddenly find yourself working out of coffee shops instead of a dedicated office space. The whole thing has been a mess, and it's mostly because of a bunch of selfish people who only lived as long as they have by being human parasites. It's some of the reason I don't sleep so well these days. I can't help but worry because I was in a tight spot, and rather than come together and support me, some of my extended family decided to cut my throat for something that they never gave a shit about anyway. This house. It only held value when it looked like I could use this empty old place until I could get back up on my feet. To those kinds of people, here's a great big old fuck you from me to them. They will never know how much it took for me to ask for help and to get attacked like that when all the color in the world had been drained out. It's something I will never forgive, and they don't even care. I think of that old Clint Eastwood movie, Heartbreak Ridge, where his constant advice is improvise, overcome. If I just sit around hoping for the best, it's going to bite me in the ass. And from my experience, if you make a habit out of doing that, it becomes more and more likely the worst will happen. If things work out right, I'll have a portable computer I can take anyplace. If they don't, then my livelihood isn't jeopardized, at least. It just changes a little bit. I think the biggest problem with the prospect of having to become more mobile that's the euphemism I'm using for homeless, by the way, is the prospect of once again having to give up most of my stuff. I gave up 90% of my stuff when I got divorced. It was a small price to pay to get out of an awful situation. I'm not looking forward to the possibility of losing everything again at all. The idea of becoming a digital nomad is very appealing, but that was before I spent most of my retirement on lawyers, and I can't afford even a well-loved camper anymore. I would be living in my car or crashing someplace. It's not as romantic when it isn't a life choice, but maybe I'm being moved in another direction. Maybe I'm in a current in life, and it's just taking me someplace I've never imagined before. I don't know what I must do or what I'm capable of doing, but I know at some point I might have to call on everything I've ever learned from every hardship to become something better and brighter. Something will have to give. A lot of today was setting up the new computer, moving files, figuring out how everything works. And this is the first podcast recorded on it. If I get to the point where I start interviewing people or having live chats as part of the format, this is going to work great. It's going to let me work from the road, wherever I need to be, and it'll be portable enough to stuff in my backpack when I'm out and about. For work at home, I have a second monitor, which helps so much with writing, recording, and multitasking. I don't do anything without a second monitor when I'm at home. I'm hoping that it'll be a better tool for what I need to do than my old computer was. I can already tell that this processor blows the doors off the old one, which honestly was never all that fast to begin with. It has served its purpose, and I'm grateful for how well it served me. I'm working through the book right now in spite of the existential crisis I've been having. And right now, the biggest challenge is figuring out how to have enough time to edit the book. In a lot of ways, I'm losing heart with the book because I'm already ready to move on with the rest of my life. I already have another few ideas of what to write next. The worst part about that is trying to find enough time to sit down and write these stories. Writing is a very gradual process and has to be done somewhat linearly. It's a process that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, A to Z. Even if the parts in the middle don't go from B to Y in any particular order as you write them, the words themselves can only align one at a time. The book accomplished so much. It was cathartic. It was healing. In a lot of ways, I'm ready to close the cover on that part of my life, put it back up on the shelf, and start with something new. But it still has to be finished. It has to be finished before the next one can begin, really. An option would be just to shelve the book and not worry about it anymore, but I think there are a lot of important elements that need to be told. I think there's a lot of people out there that would read it, and it would resonate with them, and it would give their life some enrichment. That's the goal anyway. So with this being a writing episode, I'm going to air some thoughts that I have about the whole process. For those of you who subscribe to the writer content, this might be something that piques your interest. The first step of the project was basically word vomit. I had years of things that had built up in my head, and they were just exploding out of my brain. When the world went on lockdown, I discovered I had a lot of time to dedicate to my writing, at least if I wasn't desperately trying to maintain connections with people on social media just to stay sane. A lot of it was written from a place of pain and loss. I wound up with over 1,000 pages of all that. Now that I have distance from the story and I'm in a better place, some of it seems superfluous. I'm thinking of dropping entire storylines. I'm not sure of the importance of some of these characters, and they might have to be culled from the story. Maybe combined with others, maybe dropped entirely. It's overwhelming, really. Today I went through the manuscript with the idea of cutting out some of the characters, and as I read, I realized the characters were so minor, I was holding on to them for selfish reasons. They weren't really pushing the plot forward all that much. It's going to take some rewrites, and who knows, the characters might make it into some other story. The events are interesting enough, but there's just a lot of running off into the weeds with these people. Then there's the hardest part of all of this. As I read through, I don't like the narrative voice. There are phrases that stick out and just make me choke when I read them. They're clunky, they're cliched, empty, embarrassing. I have moments after I'm done editing these chapters when I have to question if any of it's any good at all. It actually just might suck. I mean, what if it's honestly god-awful? Have I wasted the last 2 years of my life? The disadvantage I have, of course, is I'm still editing the first half of the book. In the year it took to get to this point, I was still feeling things out. I just wanted the raw story down. The words were flooding through my head and not letting me sleep at night. It was like drinking from a fire hose. And by the second half, I think I was just getting out of cliches and idioms. I've been clearing out so many of those. You know, those empty expressions we use in regular conversation, which don't really mean anything. They just aid to the cadence of how we talk. And I'm forgiving myself for that. I guess my point is, the further I get into the story, the better it is. The closer it sounds to what I want it to sound like. But those early chapters are just so hard. I'm trying to get better at not expecting everything to be perfect, too. I don't know. I'd like to think that I'm of the school of thought that the only way you can get good at something is if you're bad at it to begin with. Too many times I've seen people who are good at something right off the bat, and they never had to work to get any better. So they just didn't. Maybe that's just me being hopeful. So why is it then, when I don't write an entire book perfectly on the first draft, I feel such a sense of shame? Writing is a hard line of work for a big reason, and that is that you have to be pretty bulletproof to rejection. Anyone out there who never got rejected wasn't pushing their envelope enough. When I submitted fiction to magazines over 10 years ago, I got really good at letting the sting of rejection just roll off. Some rejections would be within a few days. Thank you for submitting your story. Alas, it did not hold my attention. Alas. I'm pretty sure all of my friends in writing science fiction or fantasy could tell you that editor's name, who always wrote those words in his rejections. He was notorious for this, but he was also notorious at how quickly he could respond. With some publications, your story would languish in their slush pile for months, and you were lucky to get a form rejection letter. It toughened me up, and I kept taking chances, submitting more and more. At one time, I probably had 8 or 9 stories in rotation. As soon as the rejection came through, I would run off an edited copy and send it to the next place. I started getting published. Sometimes the stories outlasted the publications. I was given a kill fee once when my story was accepted, but the magazine folded before the story could even run. So lately, when I submit pitches to travel publications, I long for those days of the alas letter. Half the time I didn't even know if my email is working right or not. I send out my pitches, and they disappear into a void, never to be heard from again. It's discouraging, but I've found some cold comfort in reading that this is not uncommon. In fact, the entire landscape of publishing has been changing. I've read that the number of full-time travel writers who write exclusively for magazines and newspapers is down to just a handful, maybe 5 or 6 people. And even if you land a byline, it's more for prestige, really, because publications aren't paying what they used to, not even close. What isn't encouraging is that the medium itself seems to be faltering. Book publishing isn't doing all that well either. Think back to the last time you were in a bookstore. How many of the titles were just so alike and the stories so similar that they just blended in together? They've been saying it for years. People don't read like they used to. It makes it very hard to want to write a book just to be told, on the off chance that it isn't a steaming pile of garbage, "Hey, nice work. Too bad nobody reads these days." Whether or not people read anymore, I still know what I want to read. And this early draft isn't it. So you write 100,000 words of whatever. You go back to the beginning and clean up things. Then you hit the middle, then the end. Then you have to hit the whole thing again to smooth it out, and probably again, and maybe con a friend into reading it. And they're going to notice plot holes that you could drive a blimp through. You'll wonder why you couldn't see them. And I've been taking hits from writing for pay and the slog of dealing with these edits. There are times I wonder if I'm just not fooling myself and I should just give up everything and just do something else. God only knows. So why do we do it? What sort of masochism is involved with all this? Aren't we a nation of consumers? Isn't our job just to consume? Some of us can't help but create a story. And to be clear, we would be writing stories and poetry and songs anyway, even if there was no possibility of getting them published. It's all very punk rock. We're making stuff nobody asked for, and nobody is beating down our doors to buy it. But we keep doing it, and somebody might just love it. It might change somebody's life, or give them something to think about. It might make them feel seen and heard, or feel something at all. Sometimes that's enough to keep us working. So the process, here it is. Eventually it's as close to being done as it's ever going to get. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But it's as good as it's going to get, so you send it off. And most of the time you'll get no thanks, or alas, if you hear anything at all. One of the liberating things about this platform is I can tell a story and I record it. I produce it. It's out there. It's available for anybody that wants to listen. I don't have to rely on a gatekeeper or marketing team or whatever an agent thinks that's going to make them money. If somebody listened, for me, it's a win. I get to have that connection with somebody. They heard my story. It might have inspired them. Either way, that story was begging me to be the one to tell it. And it was heard, and lots of moans and grumbles from subterranean depths get to go back to being silent again. It beats doing nothing, and it beats worrying if I'm going to have a home in 6 months. If I don't write, I physically hurt. After all this writing and rewriting and crafting this story, this monster book, maybe the worst part is that everything goes silent. And like a dream, something that was once illustrating your mind becomes dull and it gathers dust. You forget the names of the characters and what they did, like the names of the kids you went to grade school with. There's another story waiting to be told, though. And in a finite amount of time we get to have on this planet, we get to tell these stories. Eventually our minds will run out of toner, the pages will streak, and there will be no more tales to tell. But right now, the book needs work, and it feels like the end is nowhere close to being in sight. Maybe with some crafting, it can become something close to what it should be. In the meantime, I have a bunch of bullshit in my life going on that cares little about the good things in the world, like creativity, passion, joy. I have court sessions coming up. I see almost no benefit from court and lawyers. Just a bunch of people running up to a red light, wasting the precious time we have on this earth to make somebody else pay. For your own creative process, the best advice that I have to give you is just keep working at it. It's going to be thankless. It's going to be lonely. You will have nights that'll just be you and your story. And even when you're done with it, you might think it was just me and the story. And that's okay, I guess. There are people that spend their entire lives sitting in their living room couch playing guitar for just themselves and their dog, and they're probably perfectly happy doing that. Nobody here is really writing to get rich. A lot of us are just writing to scrape by, but we enjoy writing. We love the process, and that's its own reward. I mean, I hate to sound cliche, but the work is its own reward in this way. But none of it is going to be easy. And when life gets in the way, and you just think, what would make things work out better? You think about things like conforming. You think about things like giving up your goals and your dreams just to make the bullshit stop. And here's the kicker. It's never going to stop. It's going to suck one way or the other, so you might as well do something that you love doing while it sucks. Because otherwise, you're going to be like a lot of people that the only solace they get out of life is going to that lake on the weekend. They got a case of beer, and they're going to kill those beers over the next couple of days, and then they're going to go home and start their whole week all over again. I didn't live quite like that, but I did live a life that was very much wait for the weekend. You get to live on the weekend and the rest of the time is somebody else's. And I don't like doing that anymore. I did that for 20 years. This feels hard, but it feels right. And I do have mobility now, and I do have this platform that I can talk with people, and I can send my messages out there, and I've got a lot of good feedback. So thank you to all my listeners out there. Your encouragement is so supportive. I love the feedback that I get from my friends and people I've never even met before. I really feel like I'm walking in the right direction. And this kind of gives me a good space where I can talk about these things and maybe help other people out along the way. But it also helps encourage myself to keep working on the project. Even though right now, as a buddy of mine used to say, the whole thing is balls nasty. I am still trying to work ahead. And then I've got these other ideas on the horizon, other stories to write, other books, some literary, some going more back into the world of Song of the Cinder. So I don't know. It just feels fulfilling. And right now that's important to me, even though other stuff is just kind of a grind. I think right now I'm in a good place with a lot of potential and a lot of possibilities. So you just have to keep looking for that. You just have to keep driving ahead. And you'll get there, I think. And if you don't, hell, it was a good ride. Enjoy it while it lasted. So tonight, I'm going to sign off, and thank you for listening again. I hope you're enjoying the show. Tell your friends. I need thousands of listeners to even make money off of this. So I appreciate any support. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep doing what you love doing. Music today for the outro is from my old band Dog Eye. I hope you enjoy it. Bye for now.